this is Carrie, Christ-centered counselor and life coach with Promised Coaching. Today, I want to talk about the pain and experiences that women go through and the emotions that they feel during a separation from their narcissistic abuser. And I want to talk about also the importance of having that separation, whether it be a 30-day no contact or a period of time that is agreed upon, and hopefully where a therapist or counselor is involved in that process to help during that time, so that clarity can be gained by both people, the abuser and the victim, during that separation. So in a lot of cases, this happens in abusive relationships, abusive marriages, especially where the husband and wife need to separate for a period of time. And the reason this is so important is because when the victim is dealing with chronic abuse day in and day out, their memory and their reality becomes so distorted because of all of the chaos that it's difficult to actually perceive what the truth and the reality of the situation is. In a lot of cases, victims get very sick in these relationships. Their mental health is affected, their physical health is affected. And when they are dealing with chronic abuse day in and day out, they cannot get to a place of stability for any length of time to where they can actually have a calm enough nervous system to be able to think clearly and rationally about the situation. So this is highly recommended by therapists if chronic abuse is going on in the home, to physically separate from the abuser. So that way you are able to properly evaluate the situation, gain the clarity that you need, and are able to make healthy, rational decisions moving forward in the relationship. And I want to talk about the emotions that victims go through and empathize with that during that separation period, because there's so much that goes on during that time. My ex-husband and I were separated for over a year of our marriage. And during that time, there were so many times that I believed that things were stable and normal and healthy, and that we were moving towards reconciliation and being able to move back in together, and then things would blow up all over again. So let's talk about what that looks like, and when it's time to say enough is enough and finally do like a final intervention, a final ultimatum, so to speak. I know people don't like that word, but ultimately that's what it is. And we need to be real about that, that these people do need real ultimatums and interventions to actually change long term if they are willing. And in a lot of cases, they have to be willing because they're not behind bars and they haven't broken any laws to the point of having to be behind bars. And so they're just running free and breaking women's hearts and really hurting and just emotionally destroying and traumatizing people's lives. And so this is something that we really need to talk about, because what they are doing might not be breaking any laws in society, so to speak, but the laws that they are breaking are the laws of God. They're breaking kingdom laws that are far greater than any human laws that can exist. They are harming the physical well-being, mental well-being, and souls of human beings on a regular basis. So When a victim is separated from their abuser, every single day that the abuser is not getting help, not focusing on his growth, not focusing on the work, the deep internal work that he needs to do. And in some cases, these abusers, especially if they have antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, depending on what level it's at, can get inpatient therapy, and they can admit themselves into inpatient clinics for a minimum of 9 months to a year or longer, depending on how much therapy and work they need to change. In a lot of cases, they have to be willing to do this. It's very rare that a court system will order something like that, even in the case that they've been physically harmful and abusive. And a lot of times they end up doing jail time, but they don't get the actual therapy, like psychotherapy long-term, that they really need. So during this separation, the victim is having to wait. She is having to hope and pray every single day, but every hour and every day and every week and every month, that she is not with her husband or significant other, that he is actually staying committed to the process, that he is going to God, that he is doing his part. And in many, many cases, and probably most, he isn't. So she is waiting and hoping and praying and being faithful, remaining genuinely loyal to this person, with family, with friends, with God, with the opposite sex. She is refraining from sin in most cases, while he is continuing to live in it. And so long as he's not getting the supply that he needs from his wife during that separation, or his girlfriend, he is most likely, in most cases, seeking it out from someone else. And in a lot of cases, he can even be seeking it through a female counselor or therapist that he's trying to manipulate. So that's another reason I highly recommend that there are same-sex therapists for each person individually during that separation. During that time, it is excruciatingly painful, because not only are you not able to be with that person, you know, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, if he wanted to be with me, he could be, but he's unwilling. He's unwilling to do all these things. He's unwilling to make the changes that he needs to make in order not to be a harmful person, in order not to hurt you, in order not to hurt the people around you and hurt your family or your children. And so you're in this waiting process, knowing that if he was just willing to do those things, that you could be with him, but he's choosing not to. So during that time, you have to continuously release the resentment that you feel, the anger and the frustration that you feel, and grieve. There is so much grieving that happens during that time, because you love that person. You love them so much, and you want nothing more than to be with them. And every day is another day that you wake up hopeful, and you get on your knees and you pray to God that today is going to be the day, that today is going to be the day that he gets this revelation, and that his heart has truly changed, and that God has removed a heart of callousness from him and replaced a heart of flesh in his chest. and that is what you truly believe and hope for every single day. And then when it doesn't come to fruition, you're let down and disappointed again. And the discouragement comes in to try and take root in your heart. And so, that being said, hope, and this is something that I had to learn, cannot reside in the person. It has to reside in God. And we know that the enemy wants to come in and wreck that hope. He wants to sever that hope. He wants to turn that hope into anger towards God. But we have to remember that in our relationship with the Lord, it's a two-way street. And that person has to be willing to submit his life to the Lord. So we have to do more hoping in God that he works all things together for good for those who love him. And that he cannot force another human being to submit in that love relationship with him if they're unwilling. The enemy knows that if he can destroy our hope in the Lord, then that is the ultimate downfall of our faith. Because once we lose hope in the Lord, then our faith becomes extremely damaged and really difficult to come back from. And it takes a long time, even though it's been 2 years since I've been out of my last marriage with my abuser. I still get emotional, as you can see, because I know what that did to my faith. All the hoping and the waiting and the praying. And I know so many women that stay in these marriages for decades, and they are with their abuser, and they begin to finally see what's going on, and they're hoping and they're praying every day while still living under the same roof with them, and still having this mind of confusion and trying to wrap their mind around what they're doing wrong, always having to blame themselves and be blamed by the abuser and take on all the responsibility for his harmful behaviors. And it wears them down. I know women in their 70s who have been with their abuser most of their life, and they still hang on to their faith, but they're hanging on by a thread. And that is not what God has called us to live and walk in our purpose with him. He has called us to live in freedom. And the word says, how do you know, husband or wife, whether your spouse is saved? You don't. That's between them and God. And so if they are behaving and living as an unbeliever, you have to let them walk. You have to let them walk as that, walk out of the marriage as that. And during an intervention or an ultimatum that you give them, they are ultimately making that choice, not you. You're giving them the choice to live as a believer or continue sabotaging and destroying the marriage as an unbeliever that you are no longer going to be part of. And that's a choice you get to make. And that's the choice that Christ has given you the freedom to make. So if you are currently in a separation from your abusive spouse or boyfriend, I want to give you encouragement and hope, and understanding that your hope must be anchored in the Lord, in knowing that regardless of the outcome, regardless of the decisions of the abuser, that your hope in the Lord is what is going to carry you through, because you know and you trust in your faith in him that He will work all things, good and bad, ugly, for your good. He will work all things together for your good because you love Him, and He will pull you through it and carry you out on the other side. Whatever the outcome is, He will be on the other side of that with you, working all things together for your good. And as you continue to remain faithful to the Lord in all of it, regardless of your shortcomings, regardless of if you did mess up and do something sinful during that separation, during the pain and the agony in that, because I know a lot of women have done that as well. And if that's the case, God's grace and mercy will cover you through that. And His grace and His mercy is sufficient. I hope this video is helpful, and if you like it, please hit like, subscribe to this channel, and you'll see more videos like this. Take care.